Perfect. So this is also recorded, so if anybody does join slightly later, they can watch from the beginning as well. This is a webinar between RoomPriceGenie and Nuvo, and we're going to be looking today into the insights, planning and forecasting and how hoteliers can confidently plan ahead. So just to give a brief overview, we're going to do a quick introduction, including an introduction of who's speaking today on the webinar, and then we'll move on to a section led by Nuvo in terms of market insights and hotelier challenges, and next on to forecasting and planning ahead, led by RoomPriceGenie, and lastly we'll have a roundtable discussion based on some of the questions that we sent out previous to the webinar and the answers that we got back on those questions in terms of what's important at the moment to hoteliers. We'll also have a Q&A, so you can drop questions into the chat, but you can also send them over afterwards as well. We'll have some touch points where you can contact us after the webinar too. Great, so I think today's webinar, we're going to look at the demand fluctuations, seasonality, shifting booking windows that hoteliers face, those kind of problems when they're looking at how they forecast. And we're going to look at how Nuvo's market expertise and RoomPriceGenie's data-driven forecasting can help hoteliers plan strategically. So I'll hand it over to Riley here just to do a little bit of an introduction of himself and also what Nuvo does.
Thank you, Lauren. So first off, thank you for having me on the webinar. So Nuvo, we are a commercial services provider for hoteliers in a number of different areas: revenue management, distribution, sales and marketing. That works across multiple different touch points globally. The company, originally founded in Australia in 2018, has recently moved in towards the European and UK market, trusted by over 250 partners that work with us quite closely to be able to ultimately look at reducing cost of acquisition and achieve best possible commercial results on all their different touch points. RoomPriceGenie, very strong partner of ours, and again, very thankful to be on the webinar today.
Perfect, thank you. And then also to Katerina, just to do an introduction of RoomPriceGenie and herself.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, my name is Katrina Albadi, and I'm VP of Customer Success here at RoomPriceGenie. RoomPriceGenie is a dynamic pricing and revenue management tool, and my job here is to make sure that the clients are using our software to the best of its ability. And really excited to be partnered with Nuvo and to talk about something that every hotelier struggles with, right? Forecasting demand, planning for uncertainty, and we'll see how we can do it. Thank you.
Perfect. So the first topic that we're going to be covering is the market insights and hotelier challenges. And so Riley, here we're going to discuss a couple of points that we felt were really important on this topic. So when you're working with hoteliers at the moment and you're looking at the booking behavior, are you noticing different trends in the market at the moment compared to previous years?
Certainly am. I think there's three touch points, one or two that are probably more consolidated, and one that's a real market shift. First one of those, I think, is it's a far more diverse distribution mix than what it has been probably in the last 3 to 4 years. You're seeing guest booking patterns by device particularly change, more consolidation towards mobile platforms, on-the-go platforms, voice platforms even. So where that feeds into how hotels can effectively plan is very much looking at, okay, how can we be effectively on these touch points at the right price point, of course, but also at the right periods of time, because with these shifts, you're also seeing increasing booking traffic of last minute, not just within the hotel market, but within also markets such as service department, short-term rental markets, and that can make it quite challenging. And increasingly what we're observing is some of those trends you might have got accustomed to in recent years are really making it much murkier. It's harder to trust elements of past data, if that makes sense, because of what's changed in that respect. But what I would also say, particularly in the last 12 to 18 months, and we'll go through certain macroeconomic things shortly, but the continued search for value for money. And that's always been important, but I think that's been really enforced in the last 18 to 24 months with certain pressures that are happening in the wider economy. Consumers are certainly being more selective at the same time as there's continued supply increases within the market. It's a very competitive landscape. So being able to navigate those whilst challenging, there's certainly, ways that hoteliers can do it. So those are sort of the main shifts that I've observed.
Yeah, and I guess that ties in a lot with what a lot of the OTAs are doing, where they try and push those booking patterns as well. So you're up against that, where they kind of put those mobile discounts in place, last minute discounts in place, and they're kind of pushing hoteliers to make the most of that. But that's kind of makes it more challenging for the hotelier itself, doesn't it, to kind of fight against those trends?
It really does. I mean, we're all, searching for that ultimate level of profitability, combining that with direct share, but having a very, strong distribution mix on key touch points. So if a certain segment might drop off, that could be supplemented elsewhere. It's elements of that are becoming complex. I'd say the fundamentals in how to work towards the results you need are relatively similar, if not the same. But there's certainly challenges there that, hoteliers are facing in that respect, and being able to navigate that effectively is continuing to become more crucial than ever.
Yeah, and you mentioned before, you touched on it before, but how are there macroeconomic factors really influencing the demands at the moment, and how you forecast?
So that's a great question. I mean, I will say in the last 12 months, the wider UK market, there's been a lot of challenges that have come through. For years, you can see this continued rate growth within the hospitality sector, rebound from COVID. I'm not going to go into that, but we all know what's there. And really, there's been this period of, I guess, normalization that has sort of come back into the mix. But in saying that as well, you've got combined like national insurance increases, minimum wage increases, and ultimately where that's affecting, the bottom line for hoteliers, which is really important at the end of the day from a GoPar perspective, is really being seen. So being able to accurately demand forecast, which is what we're talking about today, is becoming even more crucial, because being able to actively see, okay, this is what we're expecting, where we're seeing it from, how it's going to eventuate, it's even harder work to ultimately get similar results that you might have been seeing 12 to 24 months ago to that bottom line. And those are, those factors are really influential. And of course, geopolitical events as well, the wars in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, those travel patterns, inbound travel has certainly affected certain segments, particularly London, which has seen elements of decline from inbound markets such as the US that you would have previously relied on a bit more. So yeah, it's highly influential. Again, navigating that and having to find new ways to supplement, I think, is even more important now and continue to be crucial. We are a very resilient industry, hospitality in general, but particularly hoteliers, and that's just continuing to come to the fore time and time again.
Yeah, and I think I see it a lot when working with properties that are looking on growth year on year, and they're looking to achieve rate growth, but actually the market conditions are so different that to achieve RevPAR growth often at the moment isn't by achieving rate growth, and being able to look at that forecast accurately and understand where you might need to come back a little bit with certain aspects with rate will overall still give you the best growth that you can have. It's a really challenging thing to face, but there are a lot of markets, you mentioned London, and London's a really important one, where rate growth is really difficult at times this year. It's been difficult to achieve that just due to those kind of factors changing from over the last 12 months.
Yeah, 100%. And London's not isolated in that. That's in the, wider UK as well. Regional markets are elements of that are observing that as well. Again, people are becoming more selective, continue that search for value for money that they see. So hotels' presence and the way they present themselves is just as important as overall holistic, rate strategy and commercial strategy to be able to capture what you need to capture at this point in time.
And that, so when we're looking at that, and then, so the regional differences in booking patterns or between traveller segments, is this something that's really important to pay quite close attention to now? Is that something that makes a big difference with how you can forecast accurately?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think if we're talking, market insights and, what we're observing and others are observing, there has been, continued rise in proportion of domestic tourism holistically across the UK, not just in, London, as an example, your Manchester, your secondary city markets, but also your regional markets like your Cornwalls. It's very much that sort of domestic drive tourism because of some of the factors we just talked about from a geopolitical perspective. So how can we target those effectively? It has become really important. What does domestic look for? Because we know how competitive Europe as a whole is from a rate perspective compared to the UK. UK is quite a, relatively speaking, bullish rate market. So being able to attract those domestic tourists even more so than we have previously has become really important. At the same time, there is levels of volatility that we observe from in terms of booking patterns, much more last minute decision making. And that's always going to be an onflow from what's happened in the last 5 years from COVID, because plans are a bit less certain. Because of that, people much more selective, much more, I guess, impulsive in that decision making. Even though lead times have increased incrementally over the last couple of years, there's always going to be that. So that value you can provide from flexible policies, the value you can provide from stay and save offerings as an example, whilst driving that underlying rate and balancing your ultimate RevPAR needs is even more is so crucial. And those booking patterns really reflect that. It's really a factor of agility to me.
Yeah, I think I definitely think so too, and I think we're still seeing the slight, COVID was so long ago, but there are still some things that have stayed on, and that is a lot of those commercial kind of corporate drop off in the midweek is still there compared to what it was pre-COVID, and now that corporate that used to be booked quite far ahead, you think kind of 7-8 years ago, your midweeks could be booked up quite far in advance, and even that corporate stay now can be quite last minute. Plans changed, having to travel, and then it's last minute. It's not a consistent, I'll be booked on a Tuesday and Wednesday and I know that I'm going to be. So even that segment that used to be quite certain and you could predict the behaviors, I think even that now is still quite uncertain at times, isn't it?
It can be, and I think that again, this comes back to a distribution point, but elements of distribution from a GDS perspective has changed over the last couple of years as well, where there has been this increase that is seen across multiple different touch points, whichever GDS provider you ask, where there's a lot more non-negotiated business that's coming through. Now, generally speaking, that's more last-minute market-looking value for money based off of what's required. At the same time, there's other observations in markets again like London, where instead of having that consistent Tuesday, Wednesday, as you just imagine, webinars like this are very common now. Therefore, you'll make that trip instead of a couple of short ones a month, 2-3 nights, you'll have one a quarter, and that might be a week. So that has flow-on effects as well. And then, of course, you've got your group segments, your MICE segments as well, where event business has changed to a certain extent. And that, of course, has a flow-on in terms of room performance. So, yeah, there's changes in that aspect on a macro level. And then, certainly those lead times, depending on the market, I would say has become a lot more volatile than what it has been previously. And therefore, anecdotally, less predictable. But again, when we look at, from a commercial perspective, when we look at RoomPriceGenie, RoomPriceGenie is a system example, and how we're able to accurately forecast demand based off of key market factors and elements of what's being seen. There's still certainly ways to leverage effectively and be able to achieve the results you want to.
Yeah, perfect. And I think that leads on really well to the next topic, which we're touching on, which is forecasting as a whole, and kind of looking at how that ties in with both Nuvo and RoomPriceGenie. And I think we've got a couple of main touch points, but it's obviously such a broad topic. But then when we think about forecasting, the main question everyone asks is, how do you decide what data sources to use for forecasting and which ones to trust, and how do you kind of make them work together? So, the main ones that you can consider are your kind of historical data sources, looking at market data, competitor pricing, and events, both kind of known and unknown events. So how do we feel those data sources kind of all work together, and how do we know which ones to use?
That's a great question, and there is a lot of data, and data can be overwhelming. At RoomPriceGenie, we prioritize the real-time market data, and over purely historic trends. Well, we still look at the historic trends. We give you the context. We provide the pace reports. We provide you the pickup reports against last year. But to what Riley was saying earlier, market conditions are so fluid that we do want to give you the context. We want to show you the context. But what happened last year doesn't necessarily predict what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So then looking at real-time competitor data, their pricing, their availability, the current demand signals from the market, some upcoming events on the specific market and how they're impacting that demand, that's what we're looking at. And the beauty of this, that we are forecasting forward, and while you still have the visibility into that historic performance, and talking about the sort of human versus machine, right? What we say is that we you maintain the control. We look forward, we pick up on demands, and we'll tell you what we think you should be doing and how. But then you still, if you feel like the manual adjustment is required because you see in the data, you're working with, if you're working with partners like Novo, it becomes valuable where you get the operational context and combined with the market and intelligence. And then together, it helps you to understand not only how your booking window shifts or how the regional demand patterns are changing, right, with that the data that comes through, but also helps you to kind of plan for the operational challenges that comes with it, right, the staffing needs, you name it. So basically using the human and system approach, right, it helps your expertise to understand kind of why the market is behaving in a certain way, and then using tools like us to then decide on kind of what to do, and then do it well automatically.
Yeah, and I think it ties in really well when we're talking about some of the difficulties that have come in terms of the cost of providing services, and forecasting becomes so much more important, from like staffing levels, and hoteliers aren't in a position to get that wrong at the moment, really, because the costs are so high now for those kind of things. So sometimes I think leaning too much on historical data can be can backfire, because it is so fluid in terms of what's happening. And I think we always try and balance very well what we're looking at forward data, and we're trusting what's happening in the here and now and what we can see. But then your expertise is what kind of brings back in, okay, well, when this happened before, what were the trends? Do I understand how to predict what's going to happen next based on what I've already done? So it's a really important mixture.
Yeah.
And that brings so when we're talking about balancing human intuition and system generated forecasts, I think it's one of the things I notice the most when speaking to hoteliers is that really do struggle with the balance a little bit of doing that. Because I know myself from working in properties, you get used to what's happening, you have a gut feeling about what's coming next, and sometimes it's hard to find the difference between that gut feeling and looking at what the data is actually suggesting is going to happen. And I think you kind of mentioned before that human versus system aspect that people think's happening, where actually we want it to be a combination of the two, don't we?
Yeah, we get asked this all the time, right? When should I trust the system? When should I override? How should I make its decision, right? And we here at RoomPriceGenie believe in this sort of human empowered by the system, not human versus the system, right? If you are a general manager for 10 years, your knowledge of the market's there, it's invaluable, and you should absolutely lean on it. And when you make the decisions, but then again, we keep saying again that market conditions change, and the system excels at tracking those. We are looking days ahead. We're constantly scanning for those market trends, and we're seeing what's happening. It can help you react quickly to that. But then, coming back to the other one, where the human intuition comes in, is where something that system doesn't know. You're in the middle of group negotiations. They're already happening, but it's not yet showing in any booking patterns. You know about it, we don't. Where maybe there's a local event about to be announced, or it has been announced, but it hasn't been yet reflected in the data, and kind of you want to take action preemptively. Or again, the staffing challenges that we mentioned, or you have a renovation in your room. Again, we don't know yet that is about to happen. So we are, before having this information, we won't be able to make a decision on that. So again, let us do what we do best. And then also bring your expertise. I don't feel that one is better than the other. It's about constantly working together and bringing it to the table kind of in the best way possible to plan ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think so when we're looking at how group business events and seasonality complicate that forecasting, they've all got a kind of a role to play. And seasonality is something that I think a lot of times we do rely on historical understanding when we're trying to look at forecasting ourselves, because seasonality is something, you know, that comes and goes every year. But especially we know in the UK that seasonality actually is very fluid in itself, because we're so reliant sometimes on what the weather's doing, which is very unpredictable here and changes from year to year, where we might get that good weather. And so again, looking forward at that data is always a stronger kind of grounding than trying to look back at what happened last year, because it's very hard to make those comparisons. Even with those event shifts, and Riley touched on before that some markets are so saturated now with the amount of offerings there are for rooms. I mean, I can't quite remember the statistic, but I was looking when I was in Leeds earlier this year, and there's such growth within that market in terms of the amount of room stock available, that even events that happen year on year have a different impact on hotels now, because if a market now has so much more room offering, then it dilutes what you can sell your rooms for. And I come across it so much where hoteliers will say, I can achieve X amount in this event, and then we get closer and we get closer and we're not achieving that anymore. And that's nothing to do with the offering within that property, it's to do with how that landscape has changed. So how do we feel that we can best kind of forecast for those specific things like group business or events that are quite different?
Yeah, no, for sure. So talking about the events and seasonality, you I think hit the nail on the head there, where you know things going to happen. Summer's going to come, and I know that my summer is busy, or I know there will be a festival in September. But that what we don't know is how busy it's going to get. To what you said, there will be new hotels that were open, there are new more rooms on the market. Will I really be able to book that, and will that demand pick up, and will it start building? And that's where, again, RoomPriceGenie comes forward. And this is actually where we totally excel at, where as demand builds and as it changes over time, the system will adapt to that. And the strategy, you don't sit down in January and decide your strategy for the rest of the year, right? It evolves with the market. It allows you to change. It allows you to go up and go down when the market, depending on what market does. One of the things that, talking about having the strategies for a year, a lot of hotels that we work with come with sort of minimum legs of stay that they want to impose on certain days, particularly say 3-night minimum on the weekends, right, and over summer periods. But then again, as that demand shifts, that rule doesn't always work. And for example, you'd have shoulder days where you might miss, the room becomes unbookable because you have to reservations on both sides. And when you look at 365 days ahead or more, it's very hard to keep an eye on that, and very easy to miss. And that's again where system comes forward. It'll pick up on those restrictions, and when appropriate, and when you give it a permission to, will remove that, allowing you, taking away the rigidity of the rule, and letting you maximize again your revenue in places where otherwise you would have just had a miss. And it gives, again, giving you that confidence and peace of mind that I don't have to be in full control all the time. You also kind of building on top of that, with the group bookings, it's always a tricky question to answer, right? You usually negotiate groups in advance. However, we talked about the advance shifting to being closer yet, but something that you don't see in the data, and the system doesn't know is coming. And the ultimate question: should I even be accepting this group? What price should I give to them? And something that RoomPriceGenie has been working on a recently released called a group displacement calculator. It helps you to answer this question. Basically, is it better for me to accept this reservation or is it better for me to wait for transit individual bookings to come through? What we do is, this is again where the combination of forecasting and historic data comes forward. We comparing your costs. We're looking at your profit impact. We're looking at historic data, and then tell you that what will be the result of you accepting this booking based on the data we currently have in the system. And the reason why here RoomPriceGenie will have this feature is that it allows you to speed up the decision and helps you with the consistency of those decisions, right? Rather than manually calculating, oh, how much is it going to be, and sort of only relying on the gut feeling whether I should do it or not. It helps you to answer like, okay, what if I counter offer this rate? What if I offer a higher rate, and see how that would result in your revenue impact. And again, sort of coming back to this human versus system, right? You know the groups are coming, you have your local intelligence in that, but then the system can help you to answer the question of what they're worth, whether it's the right business for you to take, at what price should you be taking it, and kind of giving you peace of mind, really. So again, with 365 days in a year, there is a lot of things that every hotelier has to think about. And if there are pieces that the system can support you in making decisions for, or take that burden off, say taking the some of the rigid rules off, that is definitely something that you should rely on, without thinking that by giving it to the system, you lose the control. And again, having the partners like Nuvo to help you making those decisions and coherently looking at your business just helps that those decisions to move forward and making them better.
Yeah, perfect. And I think when we've touched a little bit on events, but events go from anywhere like a repetitive event that's happening year in, year out, to stuff that comes out of nowhere, or at least maybe changes dates that we aren't expecting. And I think when hoteliers look at how to handle that, the amount of people I speak to that spend so much of their time constantly like checking certain websites, looking for dates, because they know it has such a huge impact on their overall revenue turnover, but it's very, very hard to keep on top of. You know, if you live near an event where the music events, then it changes the whole landscape of that month for you if there is a couple of events announced for that month. And I guess how important are things like that for forecasting at the moment, and how do you overcome that if you've really got no idea at the beginning of the year what that might look like over the next 12 months?
No, yeah, for sure. At RoomPriceGenie, generally, I think a lot of revenue managers across the globe sort of seen the Taylor Swift effect. I think there was Harry Styles effect. Recently, Oasis talking, UK. There is definitely a perfect example of those where before even tickets go on sale, but the moment they're announced in particular cities, the demand shifts. It can happen overnight. It usually happens overnight because you have to be away from your computer and not able to control it. And when that happens, say overnight, you can be booked and potentially losing on that extra bit of revenue you could have got if you were there, able to increase your prices. And actually, talking about Taylor Swift, this is when we saw that happen, and it prompted us to develop a tool at RoomPriceGenie called Surge Protection, which looks at events like this. If we see a sudden demand growing and reservations coming in, allows you to set the price higher and buying your time to assess what is the true demand, and then helping you to adjust your strategy there and maximize the revenue you can get from those events. And again, the hotels that we now see using the surge protection, say when Oasis came forward, we saw them we saw the system in action. The system helped them to maximize the revenue in that moment and sort of during that initial demand spike. Now, there are still the black swan events, right? There are things that we cannot predict or control, and those are different, and you still should plan for them and have, things that you're going to do in a situation like this. But if you have a surprise event, that's for sure something that where automation that is on always is able to help you with and make sure that you come at the top and you come get the best results out of this surprise.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. And I think previous to this webinar, we sent out a survey with some questions because we thought we'd like briefly discuss some of the answers that we were given to those questions and see if there's anything here where we can help. So the first question was, what is your biggest challenge when planning ahead for your hotel? The main answers that we received back were between demand forecasting and pricing strategy, which obviously both of them tie in together really. And I guess we're touching on a lot of what we've already said here. So when we're looking at how we plan ahead, what should we use to plan ahead, and what parts of our data are the most important? And when trying to forecast, that obviously it projects then what we're doing within our pricing strategy going forward. When are we expecting there to be lulls? When are we expecting it to be busier? How do you feel those 2 points tie in really to how we forecast at the moment?
Oh, look, I think from my perspective, they completely interrelate. And I think, that predictive pricing and demand forecasting, I think a lot of that struggle for hotels outside of what we talked about in the last half an hour, especially if you're on site, it's a very insular sort of viewpoint of, 1 month, 2 months, what's happening in the next sort of 8 weeks. And there's a laser focus operationally from ownership, from whatever your leadership structure is, generally speaking, because that's more in the instant. And where the opportunity really lies a lot of the time is further out. So being able to use, again, elements of your own intuition if you've worked on site, understanding general trends, but again, tools like RoomPriceGenie, different, and all different sorts of data available forward is so crucial, whether that be hotel pricing structures, whether that be flight data, if you have access to it from certain other tools, whether it be the Airbnb market, because those indicators are all predictors of demand at the end of the day. If you're seeing shifts, for example, in flight patterns that are consistently coming into a location, and that might not be seen, that would suggest, there's certain potentially events, or it's a busy corporate transient period. So therefore you can leverage that because there's going to be, a relative influx into certain cities. Similar thing from an Airbnb market perspective, if you're working, in a regional location that might be a little bit more seasonal and might be in shoulder season, if you're seeing elements of the Airbnb market that might be a little bit more compressed or priced highly because people are looking for those experiential weekends, then there's a real opportunity, again, to be able to leverage pricing and see things before your competitors. Great news is RoomPriceGenie provides basically a lot of that data, particularly from the Airbnb side. So that feeds into that picture and how pricing and predictive demand from my side interrelates to each other.
100%. And again, talking about why Nuvo and RoomPriceGenie partnership matters so much. Revenue decisions impact operations, and then operational constraints impact your revenue potential. One does not exist without the other. You cannot optimize one without considering the other. And you can be seen going to achieve 95% occupancy, but then if you don't have staffing to deliver quality of service at that occupancy level, you're setting yourself up, for poor reviews, and then ultimately that long-term damage, and next year not seeing the results you wanted to see. Or the opposite is true as well, right? If you are managing occupancy to protect the service quality, but then you're leaving the revenue on the table because you haven't optimized the pricing structure on that, it's equally as damaging for you in the long run. So we are, working in combination, right? That treating the revenue management and operational planning as kind of one discipline versus two different ones, and optimizing for both will get you that sustainable and profitable growth, not just short-term revenue spikes and then the burnout that ultimately kind of damages the guest experience and damages your results in the long run.
And I think it's key for that as well, just to finish on that. Sorry, Lauren, I cut you off. But I think it's key, and coming back to, a hotelier's perspective, real understanding of what internal costs are so crucial. In fact, that's more crucial than ever. Because there's always that certain threshold where profitability in an operation always lives, whether that's through occupancy growth or ADR growth any given day. So if hoteliers have a fundamental understanding of that, whilst being able to balance service, that's where results matter at the end of the day. Because being able to drive top line is so important. Being able to balance cost line in the middle is so important, because what flows through to the bottom line at the end of the day, that's why we're all here. So that's what we need to work, continue to work on. And I think that's sort of my message from today, is really analysing this very holistically.
Yeah, definitely. I think it leads on to the next question, which was, how far ahead do you usually plan your room rates? And everybody selected either 6 months or 12 plus months. For me, there will be different levels to how much you're planning, but it's absolutely crucial to have 12 months plus of rate planning. Obviously, you will have a bigger focus on the short term, and you should have a bigger focus on the short term, but you should be able to forecast effectively enough to have a 12-month rate plan in place. And it is important that happens. With things like events as being a really obvious one, but they don't happen in the here and now. So if you've got no planning ahead, you've got no system in place to react to that, that is really where the big difference can be made in terms of that turnaround. So like Riley, when you're looking at your forecasting, what's your kind of structure? Do you always kind of look at 12 months? Do you focus in on a shorter period?
So from our perspective, it's, different periods of time is different lens. So yes, of course, within a, sort of 3-month time frame, there's a little bit more focus, I would say, collectively. But again, 12 to 18 months, even in certain destinations, for example, your island destinations that you might work with, would even be 2 years. And the reason for that is because you're doing a lot of that sort of group buying incentive business, which is another segment again, where that's more worked on that 18 to 24 month lens. But absolutely having that, 12 to 18 month viewpoint is very crucial. Now, what is that informed by? Again, going back to data. Yes, of course, understanding general seasonality trends. If there's repeat recurring events, when they generally happen, we can place that in there. But again, the longer you plan out, the more advantage you have, because you've been proactive. And, there's elements, whether that's you're using a system, whether you're not using a system, the longer you plan, you have more opportunity to be proactive, but also reactive, because, you might not get it right every single time. I don't think, anyone can say they do. So therefore you have more time to be able to react and adjust accordingly to be able to get the results that you need to get to. If that makes sense.
For sure.
Yeah,
and again, just to agree with that, six months is absolute minimum. The more ahead you plan, the better. But then, just to add to that, again, planning ahead doesn't mean locking the decision, right? It doesn't mean that you sit down and, and for next 18 months, everything's running smoothly and you don't have to make any more decisions, right? It's having the strategy and having the strategies then that can adapt. Yes, a lot of the events are announced, say 6 to 12 months out. Yes, your seasonality shifts in advance and you can start preparing for them. But then, again, for those things that are more unpredictable or changing and fluid, staffing, market conditions, things that evolve, that's where you have to kind of constantly coming back and seeing if we're still trending in the right direction. Again, planning, but also be flexible with what you're doing.
Yeah, and interestingly, so the next question that we asked was, what was your number one concern when it comes to forecasting demand? And the main answer to that was sudden shifts in the market. So there's an element where hoteliers are wary to plan too far ahead because they are aware that those changes to the market happen. And I think that's the importance, going back, of that. It should always be fluid. So we should always be moving with what's happening, but we have to still have a plan in place that we're just happy to amend as those conditions change. The other point that was made within the survey questions as well was trusting comp set decisions. And this is a really, really big one for me, because I feel like long gone are the days of like sitting with a list of prices that your local competitors are are charging and trying to price point yourself in the middle of those, that's a really manual process. Like, that is a really time consuming process, because you have to make sure that you have a good understanding of what their offering is to be able to appreciate whereabouts you should be sitting within that market. It's an exercise that should maybe be done when you first open, to understand whereabouts you're entering the market. But after that, we shouldn't need to trust our comp sets decisions, because we should be looking at wider data sources than that. Actual market shifts are very different to trusting what a singular competitor is doing in the market. So I know our outlook on it is quite different, and I think as time moves on, nobody anymore really does that kind of comp set looking in, and we shouldn't be trying to just trust one or two people in the market. And I think that's probably fair in terms of our decision-making processes now. Just moving on as well, we have, do you currently use any tools to support forecasting and planning? I think it ties in really well to what we've just said, because everybody picked between a combination of manual experience and using a revenue management system. So I think we've touched on that quite a lot already, that the combination of those two is the perfect combination, and one really can't override the other. I don't know if you've got anything to add, but I guess we have already touched on it a little bit.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Basically, from my perspective, agree. One doesn't override the other. Combining both is incredibly crucial from our side.
Perfect. And just the last question was, if you could solve one problem in planning and forecasting today, what would it be? And the answer was reducing the uncertainty. I always remember when I was doing like my training in revenue management, it was always that there isn't a right or wrong answer. You can never get to the end of it and know for definite that you made all the right decisions and you maximize completely effectively, because there's always the what if situation if you'd done something differently. And you can't even always make accurate comparisons between years, time periods, because the market has shifted, the booking trends have shifted. So it is impossible to get rid of the uncertainty. I think the best way to reduce that uncertainty is looking at the most effective tools. And again, we're going back to that. That is using a revenue management system that can show you what's happening with forward data, what's currently happening in the market, and using the knowledge of what has happened previously to kind of mirror that forward data. But reducing the uncertainty is something that is quite hard to do, but we can reduce, but we're definitely never going to get rid of.
I think if we got rid of the uncertainty, it might take a little bit of the excitement out of it, and then we'd all be a subject experts.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you know, the again, talking about uncertainty, you have to attack it from multiple angles, right? You have the pricing uncertainty, and that's where a tool like RoomPriceGenie come forward. You have the operational uncertainty, and that's where Nuvo can help you kind of be more resilient towards that. And then your knowledge, like not to take away your knowledge, your local expertise, that also helps to all of those things combined help you to be prepared for that uncertainty. So technology, strategy, and then local knowledge. Those the three things that you should utilize in preparing.
Perfect. So I think that concludes the survey questions. I don't know if anybody's got any questions and they want to pop them in the chat, and we might not have time to cover them off today, but we can certainly get back to you with any questions that you've got. And I think we've got a way that you can get in touch with us both as well. So here, if anybody wants to get in touch with RoomPriceGenie, you can do it through the code there. You can scan. And then we've got one coming up for Nuvo as well here. Anybody wants to get in touch with Riley. So thank you everyone for joining, and have a wonderful day. If there are any questions in the chat, we will get back to you with the answers. Thank you. Have a good day.